The first time Thelma Collins said those words in my car, my world tilted sideways. For 3 years, I was a ghost in a white shirt. I was a driver for Joel Collins, a billionaire with a mean streak. My job was simple: keep my eyes on the road and my mouth shut. Every mile I drove was money for my daughter Sandy's future. Since her mother passed away, I did everything to keep Sandy safe and happy. But in the rear-view mirror, I could see that Thelma was not happy. She was Joel's wife, but she looked like a prisoner in a fancy dress. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you are tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. The change happened on a Tuesday. Thelma didn't have any shopping bags or party invites. She looked terrified. She leaned forward and whispered that she needed me to take her somewhere private. It wasn't a romantic request. It was a cry for help. She held a small black computer drive against her chest and told me that if Joel found out she had it, we were both dead. Just like that, my quiet life was over. I was now involved in a billionaire's dangerous secrets. I drove the black Mercedes away from the Collins mansion without asking questions. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. Thelma sat in the back seat, still holding that drive like it was the most precious thing in the world. Her blonde curly hair was messy. Her red dress looked expensive but wrong for a Tuesday afternoon. She wore red like she was going to war. I turned onto an old forest road that wound through tall pine trees. The road was bumpy and narrow. Nobody came there unless they wanted to be alone. After 20 minutes, I pulled over at a small clearing. The car engine ticked as it cooled down. Birds sang in the trees. It felt peaceful, but my heart was racing. I asked Thelma what was going on. She told me to call her by her first name, because she wasn't really Joel's wife anymore, not after what she had found out. Then she explained that Joel wasn't just a tech billionaire. He sold weapons, illegal weapons, to anyone who would pay, countries that shouldn't have them, groups that would use them to hurt people. She had found shipping records, bank transfers, and emails. Everything was on the drive she held. I asked why she was telling me all this. She said I was the only person who ever looked at her like she was a real person. Everyone else just saw Joel's wife, Joel's trophy, Joel's possession. But 6 months ago at a charity dinner, I had held the door for her and said ma'am like I meant it. She said I saw her as a person, and she needed someone who saw her. I remember that night. I had held the door because it was polite. I said ma'am because I was raised that way. I didn't think it meant anything. But to her, it meant everything. My phone rang. It was Marcus, Joel's head of security. Marcus was former Special Forces, the kind of man who solved problems permanently. I didn't answer the call. I told Thelma that they were already looking for us. She said she knew. Joel tracked everything. The car had GPS. My phone had GPS. He probably already knew where we were. I started the car and drove back onto the road. My mind was racing. I thought about Sandy. She was 12 years old and needed me. I had promised her after her mother died that I would always keep her safe. I had promised her a normal, boring, safe life. And now I was driving into danger with my boss's wife and evidence of international crimes. But I also thought about the people who would die if Joel kept selling weapons. I thought about Thelma trapped in that mansion with a man who treated her like furniture. I thought about the ghost I had become, invisible and silent and useless. Thelma asked where we were going. I told her I had a friend who worked for the FBI in Sacramento in the cybercrimes division. If anyone could help us, it was her. Thelma pointed out that Sacramento was 3 hours away. I said I knew, and that Joel's people would be following us the whole time. I looked in the rear view mirror one more time. The forest road was empty behind us, but I knew it wouldn't stay empty for long. I drove the Mercedes to a hiking trail parking lot about 5 miles away. There were 3 cars there belonging to hikers doing normal things on a Tuesday afternoon. I envied them. I told Thelma we couldn't use the car anymore because Joel could track it. She asked what we should do. I said we needed to get a different car. I walked over to an old pickup truck. It was dirty and scratched and looked like it belonged to someone who used it for work. I checked underneath the driver's side for a magnetic key box. People who work with their trucks often hide spare keys there. I found it. Thelma seemed surprised that I was stealing a car. I told her I was borrowing it and would make sure it got back to the owner eventually. I helped Thelma into the truck. She looked strange sitting there in her fancy red dress and high heels against the dirty floor mats. But she didn't complain. She just held on to that drive and watched me work. I used to be a security specialist before Sandy was born. I knew how to hotwire cars and avoid cameras and disappear. But I had given all that up for a quiet life, a safe life. Now I was remembering all those old skills. My hands knew what to do even though I was 3 years out of practice. The truck started. It smelled like oil and old coffee, and the engine made a rough sound. But it ran. I drove out of the parking lot and onto the back roads. I avoided highways because highways have cameras and traffic. Back roads twist and turn and give you options. Thelma was quiet for the first hour. She just stared out the window at the trees passing by. Then she told me she wore red because Joel hated it. He said it made her look cheap, like she was trying too hard. So she wore on the day she left because she wanted him to see her in red one last time and know that she didn't care what he thought anymore. I said that was brave. She said no, brave would have been leaving years ago. This was just desperate. We drove through small towns where people waved at passing trucks, and everyone knew everyone else. Places that felt safe. But I knew we weren't safe yet. My phone was still off. I wanted to call my sister and tell her to pick up Sandy from school and take her somewhere safe. But turning on my phone meant Joe could track us. So I waited and looked for a payphone instead. We stopped at a gas station in a town called Millbrook. It had one pump and a store that sold everything from milk to fishing tackle. There was a payphone outside that still worked. I called my sister Rebecca. When she answered, she was confused about why I was calling from a payphone. I told her I needed her to do something and not ask questions. She knew something was wrong. I explained that she needed to pick up Sandy from school and take her to her place in Oregon. She should tell Sandy it was a surprise visit and keep her there until I called. Rebecca asked what was going on. I said I couldn't explain right now, but needed her to trust me. There was a long silence while Rebecca thought about whether to argue with me or just do what I asked. Finally, she agreed, but told me I'd better call soon and explain everything. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. I had just sent my daughter away. I had just admitted that the safe life I built for her wasn't safe anymore. But at least she would be far away from Joel Collins and whatever happened next. When I got back to the truck, Thelma was eating a candy bar she had bought inside. She asked if I had a daughter. I told her about Sandy, that she was 12. Thelma said I must be terrified. I admitted I was. But I was more terrified of teaching Sandy that it was okay to look away when bad things happen. Her mother always said that being a parent means showing your kids how to be brave even when you're scared. Thelma said my wife sounded smart. I agreed and explained that she had died 4 years ago from cancer. It was fast. Thelma said she was sorry. We got back on the road. The sun was starting to set, and the sky turned orange and pink. It was beautiful, but I couldn't enjoy it. I was too busy watching the rearview mirror. That's when I saw the black SUV about half a mile behind us. It was keeping pace, not getting closer or falling back, just following. I told Thelma we had company. She turned around to look, and her face went pale. She asked if it was them. I said probably. The road ahead split into 2 directions. One way led the highway. The other led into the mountains on a narrow coastal route. The coastal route was dangerous with lots of sharp turns and cliffs, but it was also hard to follow someone there. I turned toward the coast. The black SUV followed. The road got narrower and twisted like a snake. On my right was the mountain. On my left was a cliff that dropped down to the ocean. There were no guardrails in some places, just air and a long fall. I pushed the old truck as fast as it would go. The engine roared and the steering wheel fought against my hands. Thelma held onto the door handle with white knuckles. The SUV got closer. I could see it was Marcus driving. He was alone, which was good. One person was better than a team, but Marcus was very good at what he did. We came to a straight section, and Marcus sped up. The SUV pulled alongside us. Marcus looked over at me with disappointment, like I was a dog that had bitten its owner. He swerved toward us. Metal hit metal. The truck shook, and I fought to keep control. If I went off the road on the left, we would fall to the ocean. If I went off on the right, we would hit the mountain. I hit the brakes hard. The truck slowed down fast, and Marcus shot past us. He didn't expect it. By the time he realized what I had done, I was already turning the truck around. I drove back the way we came while Marcus was still trying to turn around on the narrow road. We had bought maybe 20 minutes, maybe less. I told Thelma we needed a new plan. Going to Sacramento was too obvious now. Joel knew that's where my FBI contact was. He would have people waiting for us there. Thelma asked what we should do instead. I said we needed to get the information out first, then worry about getting ourselves to safety. She asked how. I told her we needed to find an internet cafe or a library, somewhere public with computers. We could upload the files to multiple places at once. News organizations, law enforcement, government agencies. If the information was already out there, Joel couldn't stop it by stopping us. Thelma thought about this. Then she said that made sense. She asked if I really thought we could pull this off. I told her honestly that I didn't know, but I knew we had to try. We drove until we found a small town with a library. It was late afternoon, and the library was open for 2 more hours. We parked the truck a few blocks away and walked to the library. Thelma still looked out of place in her red dress, but people in small towns are polite. They didn't stare too much. Inside the library, we sat at a computer in the back corner. Thelma plugged in the drive and started copying files. I watched the door and the windows. Every car that drove past made my heart race. Every person who walked by made me tense. The files took 40 minutes to upload to different servers and email addresses. Thelma sent them to the FBI, the Department of Justice, 3 major newspapers, and a watchdog organization that investigated illegal weapon sales. She also set up automatic releases in case something happened to us. If she didn't log in every 24 hours, the files would automatically go public. When we were done, Thelma pulled out the drive and put it in her purse. She looked at me with tired eyes. She said that was it. The information was out there now. Joel couldn't put it back in the box. I asked her how she felt. She said she felt scared and free at the same time, like jumping off a cliff and hoping there was water below. We left the library and walked back toward the truck. The sun was almost down now. The street lights were coming on. Everything looked peaceful and normal, but I knew it wasn't. That's when I saw them. 2 men in suits standing near our truck. They weren't trying to hide. They were just waiting. I grabbed Thelma's arm and pulled her into an alley between 2 buildings. She asked what was wrong. I told her Joel's people had found the truck. We couldn't go back that way. We ran through the alley and came out on a different street. I looked around for options. There was a bus stop with a schedule posted. A bus to the next town over was coming in 10 minutes. I told Thelma we were taking the bus. She looked at me like I was crazy. She said Joel's people would check the buses. I said I knew, but we didn't have many choices. We just needed to get out of this town, and then we could figure out the next step. We sat on the bench at the bus stop and waited. Those 10 minutes felt like hours. Every car that passed could be Joel's people. Every person walking by could be watching us. Finally, the bus came. It was an old regional bus that connected small towns. We got on and paid cash. The bus driver barely looked at us. We sat in the back and watched the town disappear behind us. Thelma leaned her head against my shoulder. She said she was sorry for dragging me into this. I told her she didn't drag me anywhere. I made my own choice. For the first time in 3 years, I made a choice that mattered. The bus drove through the dark countryside. I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew that the information was out there. We had done what we came to do. Now we just had to survive long enough to see what happened. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. We got off the bus in a town called Pine Ridge. It was small and quiet, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. That made it perfect for hiding, but it also meant strangers stood out. We found a cheap motel at the edge of town, the kind with doors that opened to the outside parking lot, and a clerk who didn't ask questions as long as you paid in cash. I got us one room with 2 beds. The room smelled like old cigarettes and cleaning chemicals, but it was warm and safe for now. Thelma sat on one of the beds and finally took off her high heels. Her feet were covered in blisters. She had been walking and running in those shoes all day. I went to the small bathroom and came back with a wet towel. She thanked me and pressed it against her feet. I sat on the other bed and tried to think. Joel would know by now that the information was out there. He would know that Thelma had betrayed him. He would be looking for revenge, not just to silence us. Men like Joel didn't forgive betrayal. I told Thelma we couldn't stay here long. By morning, Joel would have people checking every motel, every bus station, every place we might hide. We needed to get to real safety, somewhere with actual protection. Thelma asked where that would be. I said probably a federal building where we could turn ourselves over to protective custody. But that meant trusting that the right people got the files and were already building a case. It meant trusting the system to protect us before Joel's money and connections could corrupt it. Thelma laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. She said she had spent 10 years married to Joel. She knew how far his money reached. Judges, politicians, law enforcement. He owned pieces of everyone. She wasn't sure we could trust anyone. I understood her fear, but I also knew we couldn't run forever. Eventually we would make a mistake or run out of luck. We needed help from people with more power than us. I decided to risk turning on my phone for just 30 seconds. Long enough to send one text message to my FBI contact, Sarah Chun. The message was simple. Have evidence on Collins. Need extraction. Will contact again in 24 hours. Then I powered off the phone before anyone could track the signal. Thelma asked if I really thought Sarah would help. I said yes. Sarah and I had worked together years ago on a corporate espionage case. She was honest and smart. If anyone would take this seriously, it was her. We tried to sleep, but neither of us could. We just lay in the dark, listening to every car that drove past, every door that opened or closed, every footstep outside. Fear was exhausting, but it kept us alert. Around 4 a.m, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Car engines, multiple vehicles pulling into the parking lot, quiet voices, the sound of a door handle being tested on one of the rooms down from ours. I got up and looked through the curtain. There were 2 black SUVs in the parking lot. 4 men in dark clothes were going room to room, checking each one. They would reach our room in minutes. I woke Thelma and told her we had to leave immediately. She grabbed her purse with the drive still in it. We didn't have time to grab anything else. We slipped out the back bathroom window, just as I heard someone trying our door handle. We ran through the dark woods behind the motel. Branches scratched our faces and arms. Thelma was in bare feet because we had left her heels behind, but she didn't complain. She just ran. Behind us, I heard shouting. They had found the empty room. They knew we were running. We came out of the woods onto a side road. There was a truck stop about a quarter mile away with big rigs parked in rows. I told Thelma We needed to get to the trucks. We ran along the road, staying in the shadows. My lungs were burning. Thelma was limping now, her feet cut and bleeding from the rough ground, but she kept moving. At the truck stop, I found a long-haul trucker who was loading up for an early morning departure. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. I told him a lie about being stranded after our car broke down and needing a ride to the next town. He looked at Thelma's bare feet and disheveled red dress and my torn shirt. He probably knew I was lying, but he also probably figured we were running from something bad. He told us to get in. He was heading north towards Sacramento. That was exactly where we needed to go. We climbed into the cab of his truck. It was warm and smelled like coffee. The trucker's name was Ray. He didn't ask questions. He just started driving. As we pulled out of the truck stop, I saw the black SUVs arrive. Men got out and started searching the parking lot. But we were already on the highway, just another big rig in the early morning traffic. Ray drove in comfortable silence for about an hour. Then he finally spoke. He said he didn't know what we were running from, and he didn't need to know, but he hoped we were the good guys. I told him we were trying to be. Thelma fell asleep against the window. I stayed awake, watching the road behind us. Ray turned on his radio, and country music played softly. Around 6 a.m, my phone buzzed. I had forgotten to turn it completely off. There was a text message from Sarah Chun. Received your message. Saw the files. This is bigger than you know. Meet me at the Federal Building, downtown Sacramento, noon today. Come to the third-floor security desk and ask for me. I'll have protection ready. I showed the message to Thelma. She read it, and tears started rolling down her face. She said she couldn't believe this might actually be over. I told her it wasn't over yet. We still had to get to Sacramento and make it inside that Federal Building. Joel wouldn't give up just because we were close to safety. Ray dropped us off at a rest stop about 20 miles outside Sacramento. He gave us $40 and said to buy some shoes for the lady and get breakfast. He wished us luck and drove away. We used Ray's money to buy cheap sneakers for Thelma at a gift shop and ate terrible fast food breakfast. Then we caught a local bus into downtown Sacramento. The city was busy with morning rush hour. Office workers and tourists filled the streets. We blended in better here than we had in small towns. Just 2 more people in the crowd. The Federal Building was a tall concrete structure downtown. It looked boring and official and safe. We arrived at 11:30, 30 minutes early. I wanted time to watch the area and make sure Joel's people weren't already there waiting for us. We sat in a coffee shop across the street and watched. Thelma held the drive in her hand, rolling it between her fingers like a prayer bead. She asked me what would happen to Joel. I said if the evidence was as good as she thought, he would probably spend the rest of his life in prison. She nodded and said good. At 11:55, we left the coffee shop and walked toward the Federal Building. My heart was pounding. We were so close now, just across the street, just through the doors, just up to the 3rd floor. That's when I saw Marcus. He was standing on the corner, watching the building entrance. He saw us at the same time. We ran, not toward the building anymore, but away from Marcus. He chased us through the downtown streets. People jumped out of our way. Someone screamed. I pulled Thelma into an alley. It was a dead end. We were trapped. Marcus appeared at the alley entrance. He walked toward us slowly. He had a gun, but he kept it hidden under his jacket. This was downtown in daylight. He couldn't just shoot us in public. Marcus said that Joel wanted to talk to Thelma. He said if she came quietly and gave back the drive, Joel might let us live. He was lying. I could see it in his eyes. Joel didn't forgive betrayal. I told Marcus no. Thelma told him no. We weren't going anywhere with him. Marcus sighed like we were disappointing him. He reached for his gun. That's when 3 FBI agents came around the corner, behind Marcus. They had their guns drawn and badges out. They told Marcus to put his hands up. Sarah Chun was with them. She looked at me and Thelma and told us we were safe now. Marcus didn't resist. He knew when he was beaten. The agents arrested him and led him away. Sarah took us into the federal building through a side entrance. We went up to a secure floor where witnesses were protected. She told us that the files Thelma uploaded had started a massive investigation. Multiple federal agencies were involved. Joel Collins was already in custody. His empire was falling apart. Thelma started crying again, but this time it was from relief. Sarah told us we would need to stay in protective custody for a while. There would be testimony and trials. Joel had other people who might want revenge, but we would be safe. I asked if I could call my sister. Sarah said yes. I called Rebecca and told her everything was okay. She could bring Sandy home. Rebecca was crying when she said she was proud of me. 6 months passed. 6 months of depositions and interviews and court appearances. 6 months of living in safe houses with federal protection. 6 months of watching Joel Collins' empire crumble on the news. The evidence Thelma had found was even worse than we knew. Joel had been selling weapons to terrorist organizations and dictators. His deals had contributed to conflicts in 3 different countries. Thousands of people had died because of the weapons he sold. The trial was huge. It was on every news channel. Thelma testified for 3 days. She was calm and clear and devastating. She showed emails where Joel laughed about the violence his weapons would cause. She showed bank records proving he knew exactly who his customers were. Joel tried to look confident in court, but I could see him breaking down. His lawyers couldn't save him. His money couldn't save him. The evidence was too strong. The jury found him guilty on 47 counts. Illegal arms sales, money laundering, conspiracy, fraud. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. When the sentence was read, Thelma closed her eyes and took a deep breath, like she was breathing freely for the first time in years. After the trial ended, we were released from protective custody. The FBI said there were still some of Joel's associates who might hold grudges, but the main threat was gone. We could go back to normal life, whatever that meant now. Thelma moved to a small town in Montana. She bought a little house near the mountains with money from her divorce settlement. She said she wanted to be somewhere quiet where nobody knew who she was. She sent me pictures of her garden and her 2 rescue dogs. She looked happy. I moved back home to be with Sandy. But I didn't go back to being a driver. I couldn't do that anymore. I had spent 3 years being invisible and silent. I didn't want to be a ghost anymore. I got a job at Sandy's middle school as a security officer. It paid less than working for Joel had paid. We couldn't afford the fancy apartment anymore. We moved to a smaller place in a less expensive neighborhood. Sandy had to give up her expensive summer camps and designer clothes. One night after we moved, Sandy asked me why we couldn't afford the nice things anymore. She wasn't complaining. She was just curious. I sat down with her and told her the truth. I explained that the money I made working for Joel had come from bad things. I explained that sometimes doing the right thing costs you something, but the cost is worth it because you can look at yourself in the mirror and feel okay about who you are. Sandy thought about this for a while. Then she said she was proud of me for helping that lady. She said her mom would have been proud too. I realized she was right. My wife had always said that being a parent means showing your kids how to be brave. That day when Thelma got in my car and asked me to drive somewhere private, I had a choice. I could have stayed safe and silent. I could have kept being invisible. But instead I chose to see someone who needed help. I chose to do something that mattered. The nightmares I had been having for 3 years stopped. I used to dream about my wife dying and about failing to protect Sandy. But after everything that happened with Thelma and Joel, those dreams went away. I slept peacefully now. Not because my life was perfect or easy, but because I knew I was living honestly. I was teaching Sandy through my actions that courage means doing the right thing even when it's hard, even when it costs you something, even when it scares you. One Saturday morning, I got a package in the mail. It was from Thelma. Inside was a photo of her standing in front of her house in Montana. She was wearing jeans and a red shirt. Her hair was shorter and her face looked relaxed. On the back of the photo, she had written, "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for being brave. You saved my life." I put the photo on my refrigerator. Sandy asked who the lady was. I told her she was a friend who helped me remember that being invisible isn't the same as being safe. That sometimes the scariest thing to do is also the right thing to do. Sandy hugged me and said she was glad I wasn't invisible anymore. I looked around our small apartment. I looked at my daughter, who was growing up to be kind and brave. I looked at the photo of Thelma smiling in front of her new life. I thought about my job at the school where I actually helped people instead of just driving them around. Everything was smaller now, simpler, quieter, but it was honest, and that made it better than anything I had when I was working for Joe Collins. That night, I tucked Sandy into bed and kissed her forehead. She asked me if I missed the fancy apartment and the expensive things. I told her honestly that I didn't. I told her that the best things in life aren't the ones that cost money. The best things are the ones you can feel good about when you look back on them. She smiled and said that made sense. After she fell asleep, I went to my own room and got ready for bed. I looked at myself in the mirror. For 3 years, I had been a ghost. I had been invisible and silent and safe. But I hadn't been alive. Now I was alive. Now I could see myself clearly. I had scars from that night of running and hiding. I had less money and fewer possessions. But I had something more important. I had my integrity. I had the knowledge that when someone needed help, I didn't look away. I turned off the light and climbed into bed. Outside my window, I could hear the sounds of the city, cars driving past, people talking, life continuing. I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would bring, because I knew that whatever happened, I would face it as myself, not as a ghost, not as someone invisible, just as Michael Hewlett, a father, a security officer, a man who once helped someone when it mattered, a man who chose to be brave when it would have been easier to be safe. And that was enough. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. And here's what I need to know. Do you want part 2?